We want to take you right now to Los Angeles, where the fates of Erik and Lyle Menendez, the two brothers who have been serving a life sentence for killing their parents in 1989, are about to be announced by the Los Angeles County DA. Listen.
Jose Menendez and niece Karen Vandermolen and Katie's niece. They're all here with us. Also with us here is Brock Lunsford. He's the assistant head deputy for the post-litigation conviction unit, and Nancy Cervier, who is the deputy district attorney in charge of the resentencing unit. Let me begin by telling you that this is a case where we've had many people in this office spend a great deal of time reviewing the case. I have to tell you unequivocally that we don't have a universal agreement. There are people in the office that strongly believe that the Menendez brothers should stay in prison the rest of their life, and they do not believe that they were molested. And there are people in the office that strongly believe that they should be released immediately and that they were in fact molested. I have to tell you that after a very careful review of all the arguments that were made for people on both sides of this equation, I came to a place where I believe that under the law, resentencing is appropriate, and I am going to recommend that to a court tomorrow. What that means in this particular case is that we're going to recommend to the court that the life without the possibility of parole be removed and that they will be sentenced for murder, which, because there are two murders involved, that will be 50 years to life. However, because of their age, under the law, since they were under 26 years of age at the time that these crimes occurred, they will be eligible for parole immediately. The teams that have worked on this, on the resentencing side of it, have spent literally probably hundreds of hours by now looking at this case. These cases were originally presented on the habeas side of it, which I'll explain in a moment what that is, last year, and then the request for a prosecutor-initiated resentencing occurred earlier this year. And there have been people in this office working in these cases from the very beginning, as well as many other cases that we have. The reason why I'm here today and why I came in front of all of you about 10 days ago is because there was a more recent documentary about the case that again brought a tremendous amount of public attention. And we know there have been other documentaries, so this is not the first, this is the more recent one. And frankly, our office got flooded with requests for information. And even though this case was already scheduled to be heard in late November, I decided to move this forward because, quite frankly, we did not have enough resources to handle all the requests. And one of the things that I thrive to do in this office is to be very transparent in everything that we do. In this case, we review the prison files. And you have to understand that the way the process works, when you're talking about a resentencing under the law, it really focuses not necessarily on what the original crimes were, but it focuses on, has the person been rehabilitated, number one, and number two, can they be released safely into the community? Under that rubric, since I've been in office, we have resentenced over 300 people, including 28 for murder. Only 4 have reoffended. If that was a regular recidivism rate in this country, we would be the safest nation in the world, but we know that it's not. In fact, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the people that go to prison reoffend and get rearrested. And that's why we have so many problems. However, when you look at the case of the Menendez brothers, you see two very young people, one was 19 and the other was 21, when they committed this horrible acts. And I want to underline, they were horrible acts. There is no excuse for murder. And I will never imply that what we're doing here is to excuse that behavior. Because even if you get abused, the right path is to call the police, seek help. But I understand also how sometimes people get desperate. We often see women, for instance, that have been battered for years, and sometimes they will murder their abuser out of desperation. And I do believe that the brothers were subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation. But they went to prison for life without the possibility of parole, which meant that certainly under the law at that time, they had no hopes of ever getting out. They could have done what many other people do, which is basically said, you know what, I'm here for the rest of my life, so I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to misbehave, I'm going to join gangs, I'm going to live the life of the prison. But they never did that. To the contrary, even though they didn't think that they would ever be let free, they engaged in a different journey. A journey of redemption and a journey of rehabilitation. And often the people that begin their journey of rehabilitation and redemption in prison is often very internal. And what they do, and one of our lawyers pointed out this today, is usually the path is people try to further their education, do things for self-improvement, which the brothers have done, by the way. But it's more unique or less usual, I guess, when people not only do that, but they also begin to engage in ways to make life for others better. And in this case, the brothers have been doing so for a very long time, creating groups to deal with how to address untreated trauma, creating groups to deal with other inmates that have physical disabilities and may be treated differently. Even in one case, Lyle negotiating for other inmates as to the conditions that they live under during prison. And all this was done by two young people, now they're not as young, that had no hopes of ever getting out of prison. They have been in prison for nearly 35 years. I believe that they have paid their debt to society, and the system provides a vehicle for their case to be reviewed by a parole board, and if the parole concurs with my assessment, and it will be their decision, they will be released accordingly. I must underline, however, this case will be filed in court tomorrow. The final decision will be made by the judge. Court has to agree with my conclusion that they deserve to be resentenced. It is very possible that there may be members of this office that will be present in court opposing their resentencing. And they have a right to do so. And we encourage those that disagree with us to speak, and the court is the appropriate place to do it. We certainly feel we're very sure not only that the brothers have rehabilitated and that they will be safe to be reintegrated in our society, but that they have paid their dues, not only for the crimes that they committed, but because of all the other things they have done to improve the life of so many others. So Again, we will be filing for resentencing tomorrow. We're seeking that they would be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, as opposed to life without the possibility of parole, which is they currently have. That means that they would have 50 years to life because there were 2 murders. But because of the age upon which they were convicted, under 26, under current law, that means they're eligible for youthful parole. I think there is also important to have some introspection today, because I think that often, for cultural reasons, we don't believe victims of sexual assault, whether they're women or whether they're men. We saw in our first trial, which, by the way, they were tried twice. The first trial hung, meaning the jury could not come to a conclusion, and in fact, about half of the jury wanted to convict them of manslaughter, which, if that were have been the case, they would have been off prison a long time ago. And then there was a second trial, and then they were convicted of murder with special circumstances, which led to the life without the possibility of parole. But it's salient to understand that our own implicit and sometimes explicit bias around sexual abuse and sexual assault often leads us to severe injustices in our community. And I want to speak to those that are victims of sexual assault now, whether you're a man or a woman. Know that we're here for you. If you're a victim of sexual assault in this community, and by that we're talking about LA County, not just LA City, you can come for help. Whether you're prepared to prosecute or not, we will be here for you. We have services for you. And if you're prepared to move forward with the prosecution, we will evaluate it as we do any other case. And if we believe that the evidence is there to present a credible case in front of a jury that can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, we would proceed accordingly. You do not have to suffer alone. You don't have to keep it to yourself. And help is here unconditionally. I'm going to say a few words in Spanish because I know there's tremendous amount of interest from the Spanish media, and I know that there are going to be other speakers today, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Primero que nada, quiero dar las gracias a todos por estar aquí hoy. Estamos hablando del caso de los hermanos Menéndez. Este fue un caso donde 2 hermanos, uno de 19 y uno de 21 años, asesinaron a sus padres más de 3 décadas atrás. Los muchachos fueron condenados por asesinato y llevan en la prisión alrededor de 35 años. Este fue un caso que tuvo mucha atención pública cuando sucedió y indudablemente tiene mucha atención pública hoy cuando vemos esta habitación como está llena. La razón por la que nosotros estamos buscando que la Corte reevalúe la sentencia original.
We have been listening to Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascón. He has recommended resentencing for Erik and Lyle Menendez and says that they will now be eligible for parole immediately. The DA also said that the brothers have paid their debt to society. The 2 brothers have spent nearly 35 years behind bars for the first-degree murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, in 1989. Erik was 18 years old at the time of the killing. Lyle was 21. Their case was the media sensation of the early 90s. And during their first trial, evidence was introduced that Jose had sexually abused these 2 sons. Now, that case ended in a mistrial. During their second trial, much of that evidence was excluded by the judge. And that trial led to the conviction of the brothers and life sentences without the possibility of parole. But last year, the defense filed a petition with the court saying they have new evidence. The case will now go before a Los Angeles Superior Court judge who will make the decision to formally resentence both men and decide if the brothers should, in fact, be released from prison. And the date of this future court hearing is to be determined. I want to bring in now CBS News legal contributor and Loyola law professor Jessica Levinson from Los Angeles. Jessica, thanks so much for being with us. So walk us through what happens from here, because the DA made very clear that even though this was his recommendation, that ultimately a judge had to agree with him. Ultimately, it would be up to the court. So tell us how that process unfolds.
Well, that's exactly right. Typically speaking, a judge would defer to the district attorney. Again, this is a district attorney, not him, but whose office originally tried this case. They have access to all of the evidence. They have access to the new claims. They were obviously the ones who received this petition for resentencing. So typically speaking, not that it's a rubber stamp, but it's a pretty high bar for a judge to say, no, I don't agree with you. I just want to flag two things for people to remind us all that not only are we talking about the Menendez brothers, and that means this case is not typical, but there's other things happening here. One, this is a DA who's up for re-election in 12 days. And so the electoral calendar is looming pretty large over the legal timeline as well. If we had a judge who decided not to make a decision until after the election, you could potentially see a new DA, because Gascón is about 30 points behind, make a different recommendation. So we need to watch for that as well. The other thing that's unique here is DA Gascón said very clearly there was dissent in the ranks, that there might be members of his office who go to court tomorrow and say, Judge, I don't agree with you. Typically, once a DA says, we think, Judge, there should be resentencing, there is agreement in the office. So I think those two things, the election, the dissent in the office that we understand could go public tomorrow, I think those are reasons why a judge might say, hold on a second, whereas typically that's not the case.
So, Jessica, is there a chance that the judge says, I want to hold off until after the election, given the potential political motivation behind this recommendation?
So that's such a good and important question. And I think, it backs into kind of what is the DA's motivation here. I think for a judge, they really should just be guided by the facts that are presented to them, not the possibility that there will be somebody else in office. So look, is the judge a person who understands that there might be a new DA who has a new philosophy? Absolutely. But I think having a judge explicitly say, let's wait to make sure that the person who holds this office for the next 4 years agrees, I don't think we're going to see that. I do, again, want to emphasize, typically speaking, a judge will say yes to this type of DA recommendation. I added some complexity, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And the DA has said very explicitly that these two individuals, Erik and Lyle, would be eligible for parole immediately. And that is a possibility here.
Jessica, I want to turn now to the niece of Jose Menendez, but stick with us because I have more questions for you, but she is speaking right now at the podium. Let's take a listen.
Be heard, and that Lyle and Erik can begin to heal from the trauma of their past. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
I believe Jose Menendez is going to say a few words.
This is the niece of Kitty Menendez.
I'm sorry.
Joan Vandermolen.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for coming. We are here today because District Attorney Gascón has taken a brave and compassionate step forward by recommending resentencing for my cousins, Erik and Lyle. And we wish to offer our deepest gratitude to DA Gascón. This decision is not just a legal matter. It is a recognition of the abuse my cousins endured, and we are grateful for the DA's leadership in putting justice over politics. We know this wasn't an easy decision, but is the right one. This is about truth, justice, and healing. It is time for Lyle and Erik to come home. And I ask all of you to join us in this fight for justice. We stand united in our hope and in our gratitude. Together we can make sure that Erik and Lyle receive the justice they deserve and finally come home. Thank you again to District Attorney George Gascón for his courage and leadership. This step gives us all hope that truth will finally be heard and Erik and Lyle can begin to heal from the horrors of their past. We hope this will also shed light and increase awareness and help others who have been victimized by sexual violence. Thank you all so much for being here today. We are grateful for everyone's support.
Is there anyone else speaking?
No, that's it.
Okay. Okay, and I apologize. I'm reading notes here, and I'm trying to understand all the notes. Yes, ma'am.
I want to bring back a CBS News legal contributor and Loyola law professor, Jessica Levinson from Los Angeles. Jessica, the DA said that he was going to reconsider this case anyway. It was on the books for late November, but he expedited it because he received a flood of requests and comments from the public. Now, you know as well as I do, right now, if you go to Netflix, there's a documentary about these brothers. There is a dramatic show about them, a miniseries, and I wonder if you think that had an impact on what we just saw from the DA.
Yes, in all candor, I don't know if it has the same impact if we weren't looking at an election again in 12 days. Public pressure for any type of elected official, particularly those facing tough re-election battles, tends to fall very differently right before an election than right after an election. I'm not saying that this isn't the decision the DA Gascón would have made if he is reelected, which looks frankly unlikely. This is a different decision, but I think it's the public pressure plus where we are in the electoral calendar. We have to remember that when we decide to elect these officials, judges, DAs, et cetera, that we are putting them under public pressure by definition. One thing I want to flag for the audience is we need to be very careful tomorrow to listen to exactly what the DA's office asked for with respect to resentencing. I'm hearing that there's some complexity if he's asking for 2 first-degree murder sentences, but to be had without the possibility of parole. That may actually not be legal under California law. So we need to hear if he's talking about 2 first-degree murders, if he's talking about 2 second-degree murders, or if there's some change overnight and it's a murder and a manslaughter. I know it sounds hyper-technical, but that will hinge on whether or not the recommendation here, frankly, is legal under California law, and whether, as we just talked about, a judge is likely to say, yes, go ahead, or if a judge will say, I'm sorry, go back.
So basically, we don't know if the charges have been changed, right? Because that is what's going to determine the maximum sentence for these 2 brothers.
Exactly right. And of course, all I'm flagging here, because there was a lot of apparently dissent within the office until the last moment, is that we really need to hear what is said in the filing. What are the charges when DA Gascón goes to court, not a press conference, but when he goes into court and says, here are the charges, and this is what I suggest as a resentence, that obviously has to fall within California law. And it doesn't mean that he couldn't go back. It means that the more time that goes by, as we were talking about before, the more it's likely that somebody else may be making this recommendation.
So I imagine it's very difficult to answer the question that I think most people in the public are wondering, which is how soon could Erik and Lyle be free? Because the DA said that they are immediately eligible for parole. But according to what you just laid out, we don't know if that's true.
Well, I guess all I'm saying, and I know this is so annoying, but the job of a lawyer trying to unpack this is to say this is a little bit more complex than maybe we might think or even for some people hope. So what we have to look at is exactly what is requested in terms of the charges brought and the resentencing. Then we need to look at when the judge decides to hold the hearing and if the judge decides to rule from the bench. I know all of that is a terribly annoying answer. Look at about 30 days. That's what I'm telling people. Look at about 30 days for a judge to hold the hearing, review the evidence, look at the charges, and potentially make a decision.
Jessica, it is not annoying at all. It is critical for you to set the expectations because there is so much interest in this case. So thank you for all of your insight.